בוקר טוב. בוקר טוב לכולם.
בוקר טוב.
נפתח בשבחה של אכסניה, מקום הכולל ליד בנימין, בשולט הרב יהושע. תודה רבה על האחסון של המקום, שזוכים לראות את הרב גולדברג. רק נזכיר שהמקום, כאן בכולל יש שיעורים כל הזמן. בעזרת השם רבו שבית צריך להגיע עוד... אבא שבא צריך להגיע עוד שבועיים, יש שיעורים כל השבוע, אפשר להירשם, מי שרוצה להירשם לשיעורים, יש בכניסה דף, יש עת, אפשר להירשם לשיעורים. קטמון זה מקום שתוסס, מקום של אש של תורה, משתדלים תמיד לעבוד בתורה, אז מי שרוצה כמובן יש שיעורים כל היום, יש חברותות, מוזמנים תמיד. יש לנו הזכות לארח אחרי פורים, באמת היא שעוד לא ירדנו מפורים, צריך לעשות איסור חג אחרי פורים. תשפ"ה, שנת פורים המשולש. ככה אתמול אמרנו אצל שלי בבית, נכון? זה בשם אבא שלו אמר. אז היה פורים משולש השנה, אנחנו זוכים להמשיך את הקדושה המשולשת מהרב גולדברג שבא. רק רוצה לומר נקודה, הפעם הראשונה שנפגשנו היה סביב מפגש של אמונה. נפגשנו בצפון, 8 ימים אחרי שהמלחמה התחילה, בתוך חממות ושהחקלאים, ומיד אחרי ירו עלינו כמה פצמרים. זה היה שיעור גדול באמונה לחיות בארץ ישראל, וראינו איך הקהילות מחוברות. אתם הבאתם את הרוח מבוקה, אנחנו הבאנו את החיילים מהארץ, והיה חיבור גדול. אני רוצה לומר באופן אישי שהחיילים מאוד הרגישו את הרוח ואת התמיכה שהבאתם, וכל הזמן מה שהוליך והוביל את כל המלחמה הזאת היה אמונה. ראינו את זה לגם ברגר שעכשיו שהשתחררה, שהייתה ממש כמו אסתר של הדור שלנו, שלא הסכימה לבשל לחמאס הרשעים ולא הסכימה לעשות שום דבר, אלא הכל לקחה את זה באמונה. וחפץ חיים אמר את זה במשל אחד מאוד עמוק לאדם שהוא פוזל והוא לא רואה טוב בעיניים, והוא רואה שהבניין עומד ליפול שמאלה. אז הוא אומר לחבר שלו, תקשיב, הבניין עומד ליפול, בוא תעזור לי, אתה לא רואה? וגם החבר שלו היה פוזל, הוא אמר לו, הוא לא הולך ליפול שמאלה, הוא הולך ליפול ימינה. ואז הגיע אדם שהוא רואה ישר, הוא אומר, הבניין לא שמאלה ולא ימינה, הבניין הוא ישר, אתם עם עיניים עקומות. אין בעיה בבניין, אין בעיה עם ריבונו של עולם. בורא עולם דרכיו ישרים, דרכי השם ישרים, רק לפעמים אנחנו, העיניים טיפה פוזלות, אז לא רואים את דרכי השם העמוקות. אבל ריבונו של עולם מנהיג את העולם ומוביל אותו, מסדר אותו. העיניים שלנו טיפה הולכות לא למקומות הנכונים. וזוהי אמונה אמיתית, שאנחנו בעצם מאמינים שאנחנו תחת איזה פרק חדש בהיסטוריה, מאמינים בריבונו של עולם, שכל מה שעברנו ועוברים, הכל בהשגחה מאיתו יתברך. לפני שאתה אוכל את הלב, תראה באיזה השגחה זה. אתה צריך להסתכל הרבה פעמים בחיים שהעולם מושגח ומנוהל לידי השם יתברך. אז נזכה לשמוע כמה דברים. תודה רבה שזיכית אותנו ביומיים שאפילו שהרב כאן טרח לבוא ולומר דברים. אנחנו מאוד מעריכים. יהיה רצון שנזכה לחבר, שיהיה גשר מארץ חמדה עד בוקה. לא יודע איך עושים את זה בפועל.
יש כבר,
יש כבר גשר, שיהיה גשר בלב, כן, שיהיה גשר בינינו לבוא, ונזכה תמיד להיות ביחד עם דברי תורה, עם אהבה וחיבה. שמחה רבה.
Thank you, first of all, to Rav Pinchas. One of the... It's hard to talk about any bright spots or positive things of the last year and a half, although maybe that will be our subject for this morning a little bit. But getting to meet Rav Pinchas and that moment is one I'll never forget. Davening mincha on the border of Lebanon while the, what do they call it, purple rain was falling over our heads. And they said, you'd better daven quickly and leave. We said, what do you mean? We came to make a barbecue. It's a little bit rude. You're going to eat the food and you're sending us away? He said, it's for your own safety. Go. And as we drove, they continued to fall. But to see the type of emunah bitachon, the shara bitachon that Rav Pinchas carried in his pocket in his army uniform, that he said is the most potent weapon that he has, was and continues to be a tremendous inspiration. So thank you for this opportunity. It really is incredibly special, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to see so many friends, to be here in Yerushalayim. What better place? I had the best of all worlds. I shouldn't say the best of all worlds would be here and to be here permanently. But if I was going to be in Chutz La'aretz and in Bocca for part of Purim, this Purim Meshulash, to be able to get out on Motzei Shabbos, direct flight from Florida, and chap the end of Purim last night. My daughter's here with Leora and her family, and a very Lebedik Purim that's still being cleaned up. It was incredible privilege and opportunity. And even though I'm here for very short, when the chance came to learn together and to grow together, was one I didn't want to not take advantage of. I feel so indebted to Alex and to Eretz Chemda, who over the last year and a half, that bond, that closeness with everybody. My dear friend Schneller, all of everybody. Shmuley, maybe he'll be successful in helping us find a place here. Everybody who's, the connections that were formed are really forever and they mean the world. And so the chance to be together, to learn together, to grow together was really, really very special. I brought with me, I was asked to bring, and I did. I don't know how to distribute it, or which side of the machitza to give it to first. I'm going to leave it with Alex. I'm going to make it his problem. But I brought some of the swag. We've been speaking in the Amunah Shiur the last several weeks, months, about this idea, wherever we are is where we're meant to be. And therefore, embrace your place. You are exactly where you're meant to be. Kadosh Baruch Hu. And we made decals for the windshield of the car. So when you're stuck at a red light or behind the train or in traffic and you're running late, you remember, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, we are where we're meant to be. And when you see it, embrace your place. And a sticker for the back of the phone. Turn your phone over and whatever's going on, embrace your place, you are where you're meant to be. And then the latest thing that we made, a version of it, was this luggage tag that can hang from your luggage. So I got in, when did I get in? Yesterday, last night. I have the luggage tag on my briefcase and I was coming to customs and I was so eager to try to chap the end of Purim. I wanted to make the Suda. I wanted to get to Yerushalayim for Purim. And I didn't check any bags. I thought I'm going to fly out of the airport. It's all going to happen on my schedule, in my time, the way I want, the way I picture it. And I get to customs. And I'm decent at some things. I'm terrible at choosing lines. Whoever I'm with, I say, you choose the line. Whichever I choose is guaranteed to be the longest line. I don't know what it is. Whichever one I choose will be the long. So I was on the phone with my wife and I said, 1, 2, 3, just give me a number right now. I've got to choose, the line breaks up into 3, which one? So she gave me a number. I chose that line. And a couple of minutes after I'm waiting on this long line, the person behind the counter, I don't know where they went. They take a lunch break, have a coffee, return a phone call. They literally walk out of the customs booth and we're on that line and nothing's happening. And I was starting to feel like my heart palpitations, my pulse, blood pressure, all the things that happen when the world is not operating on our schedule. And then I saw the tag on my briefcase. And I thought to myself, I'm the guy supposedly who gives the Amunah Shiur. Embrace your place. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And that's the beauty of Amunah. You take that deep breath and you are where you're meant to be. And a moment later, I was on the phone still with my wife, and somebody else working in the customs on the side came over and said, "You're on the phone?" I thought, I'm going to be in trouble now. In America, you're not allowed to be on the phone when you're in the customs area. I didn't know that was a rule here also. He says, if you want to be on the phone already so badly, so just go. And he gives me one of the things to pass, so just leave. I said, you see? Hashem. So the second I embraced my place, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, he always has a plan. And it always works out, and it's very beautiful. So I'm leaving these with Alex. Alex, you're in charge. You could get in trouble figuring out who to give it to. We're happy to send more, or Be'ezras Hashem, we'll be back. We'll be back soon, and we'll bring more when we come. I wasn't sure what to speak about. First of all, Baruch Hashem in Yerushalayim and Eretz Yisrael, you have so many people who could speak. I don't know that you need me at all. But I'm also so humbled and feel grossly inadequate. I think the people, all of you, who live here, who've lived here the last year and a half, who've lived here a lot longer, who are living here our destiny and our future, to come in and to share a perspective and an insight and an attitude and an approach. I really feel grossly inadequate to speak about Amunah, to share about Bitachon, and to address this important but difficult and complicated topic. So I want to come at it. We find ourselves now between Purim and Pesach. It's anticlimactic, as the Rav said. Last night, deep into the night, maybe early this morning, still celebrating Purim, and then Shacharis this morning saying Tachanun. There's no Shushan Purim after Purim Meshulash in Yerushalayim. So it's a strange transition, but we find ourselves now less than Shloshim Yom Kodem Achad. It's good you're all sitting down. I don't want to pass out, but it's Erev Pesach. For those who are staying home, kashering their home and cooking, for rabbis who have to cook up drushes, Shabbos HaGodol is even a week earlier than normal this year. So we're holding by, it's Erev Pesach. Today's already Erev Pesach. It may feel like Motzei Purim, but it's already Erev Pesach. So I want to speak to you about a topic that bridges Purim and Pesach, something that's on my mind, and I think very much probably on yours, on all of Klal Yisrael, because of the year and a half, because of the time that we've had. And it's the question of pain, of loss, of suffering, and often the bitterness that goes with it. For many people at their Pesach table, the Marror is not the only or the most bitter thing. There are people who are sitting around who've suffered, who've struggled, who've encountered challenging times, who've had to navigate unimaginable circumstance. And whether it's our national collective anguish and loss, still at this moment as our hostages are not yet all home, and soldiers who continue to risk their lives, and families who've lost loved ones. But we all come to that Pesach table with a sense of pain and a sense of anguish, and that often can express itself in a sense of bitterness. When we come to the four questions, there's a famous story of Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditcher, the Berditcher, when he got to the four questions, he put his head on the table and he began to weep and he began to sob and he began to cry. And I won't elaborate and dramatize the story because we don't have the time. But he cried out and he screamed to Hashem, 4 questions? I have 400 questions. I have 4,000 questions. I have endless questions. How could there be hostages still in tunnels underground? How could there be soldiers, young people who gave their lives? How could there have been an October 7th and the kind of tragedies and calamities and catastrophes that happened? How could it be the scorn of the nations? How could it be college campuses? How could it be a rise of anti-Semitism? Jews being targeted, Jews afraid to wear yarmulkes in public places. How could it be members of Congress, including or maybe most shocking among them, Jewish members elected of Congress who are failing to protect their own people? Hashem, if you're inviting us to ask questions, it's not 4. Rabbi Yitzchak couldn't go on, he couldn't begin his Seder. Because he said, if you're inviting to ask questions, we have endless questions. But he said, what could we do? Hashem, you're in charge, you're in control. When we submit and surrender to you, we recognize it's all part of your divine plan. We can live with the questions, and we can go on, we can proceed with the Seder. But this year for us, the questions are endless. The questions compound. The questions are complicated. The collective national questions, individually, personally, people who are struggling with so many things. Health, parnasa, loneliness, longing and waiting to have children, physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, children. As I said, people are only as happy as their least happy children. The list could go on and on. Like Rav Levi Yitzchak, we feel lost, and we feel that we have so many questions. So I want to share with you some thoughts in anticipation. We're in this bridge between Purim and Pesach on navigating the questions, the struggle, the pain, and helping to try to avoid it becoming bitterness. That the Marror be the only bitter part of the Seder table. And the Marror itself is a very perplexing thing. It's a night of freedom, it's a night of celebration, it's a night of joy, it's a night of redemption. And here we are, tasting and chewing, and to a degree savoring the Marror, the bitterness. What place does bitterness have for a night of freedom and a night of celebration? Why must it be present? Why must we chew it? Why must we taste it? The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says, maybe because he was bothered by this question, he doesn't even address Marror, despite the Haggadah telling us to remind us of how bitter our exile was. He says, no, because after all, ultimately we're going to mark this night with a great shawarma lafa sandwich. Sfardim, we eat a proper matzah, the soft matzah, it's like a lafa. And the Korban Pesach was a great shawarma, the great lamb. And a proper shawarma in a lafa has a little bit harif. You have to put a little bit something spicy in. And the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh writes, in Egypt, that's how they ate lamb, and that's how we commemorate having left. That's the purpose of matzos marurim yochlu. The Marror's role, it's an ingredient in a recipe. The Marror doesn't represent something spiritual or emotional. The Marror, the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says, is simply an ingredient in a recipe. But we know it's much more than that. And as Lakach V'Alibav Haggadah of Efrem Shiur, we were privileged to have in Bocca last week. He started off last week's Emunah Shiur with 10 or 15 minutes. It was an incredible privilege. In his Haggadah, he quotes a minhag. I think the Mishnah Berurah quotes it from the Shla Kadosh. There was such a minhag to kiss the Marror at the Seder, to give it a kiss, to show it affection, to be grateful, to welcome the presence of that Marror at the Seder. Not only to tolerate that there's something sharp or something bitter or something painful there, but to kiss it, to love it, to show it affection, to somehow embrace it, to be grateful for it, which is bizarre, a bizarre thing. What role, what reason, why is it there? Why is it there? The mitzvah of eating maror, Torah tells us in Shmos and later in Bamidbar for the first Pesach and Pesach Sheni, both the Korban Pesach has to be eaten together with maror. And I have a lot of maror makomos here. I'm happy to email or share them another time. Alex, I'll give them to you, and you can pass them on to anybody who wants to see inside. But the psukim in both places tell us about the mitzvah of maror. And then later in Bamidbar, thank you. You have to eat the matzah with the maror. Now today, without the Beis HaMikdash, without the Korban Pesach, the maror today is only the Rabbanan. That's what the Gemara Pesachim Daf Kuf Chav tells us. Matzah b'zman hazeh d'oraisa, maror d'Rabbanan. The matzah remains today biblical, and the maror we eat rabbinically because we don't have. The maror is conditional or dependent. It is tied directly into the Korban Pesach. We don't have the Korban Pesach today. It's only d'Rabbanan. And the Alter Rebbe, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, writes b'zman hazeh eina ela midivrei sofrim shetiknu zecher lemikdash. Today the maror is only a throwback. When we eat the maror at the Seder table, with all the Divrei Torah will give about connecting to the bitterness of the Golus, the exile, the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch says it's commemorative of longing for a Beis HaMikdash. Like many things we do are Zecher LeMikdash, taking Lulav and Esrog, all the days of Yom Tov that we do, we're Zecher LeMikdash. So maror falls under that category of Zecher LeMikdash. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of maror? Is a complex topic for another time. The Mishnah lists 5 different possible ingredients that could be maror. If we took a poll here, how many use lettuce? How many use lettuce for maror?
Romaine lettuce.
Which lettuce? So there's many customs. Some Gedolim used iceberg lettuce. Some used romaine lettuce. If you really want something bitter and miserable, you should have kale. But even we on Pesach don't go to such a level. We don't wish upon anybody to have to eat that. But some have the custom of eating lettuce. Others eat from our horseradish. Do you grate the horseradish? Do you slice the horseradish? How do you eat the horseradish? So where do these customs, where do these minhagim evolve from? There's a lot of literature, and it is a fascinating question. In Israel, the time of Pesach, lettuce is readily available. And lettuce starts out sweet and the stalk is bitter, so that's why it was maror. Whereas in European countries where Jews were exiled and spread out too, lettuce was not available during that time of year. Maybe that was the origin of eating the horseradish. Other poskim talk about lettuce as insect infestation. So in order to fulfill a mitzvah, particularly today that's d'Rabbanan, don't violate many d'oraisa by consuming many insects. So there's a lot of literature on the halacha of, or what the custom should be. Some do both. They put a little bit of the horseradish inside the lettuce and dip that in the charosas. There are many different minhagim what to use. How much do you have to eat of the maror? So we eat a kazayis. We eat a kazayis of the maror. Do you make a bracha? Do you make a bracha on the maror? We make a birchas ha-mitzvah, a bracha for the mitzvah before we eat the maror. But what about a birchas hanenin? We have not yet washed. We didn't yet have the matzah when we eat the maror. So why don't we make a birchas hanenin? The answer is we already did. When did we? The karpas. And that's why a person should have in mind when they make the Bari Pri Adama on the karpas, they're having in mind to fulfill the mitzvah of maror as well. One should not, which can get complicated with a late start for Pesach night, everybody hungry, and all of a sudden a bland potato and some parsley is a delicacy at that hour, but one should not eat. A kazayis would obligate a bracha achrona, could be an interruption before the maror. So there are all kinds of halacha, minusha, and details one has to be aware of. An interesting question that came up more recently in Israel and elsewhere, when a lettuce is grown hydroponically. If you have a lettuce that's not grown in the ground, but it's grown above ground, with water hydroponically, what bracha is said on such lettuce? It's a big question in general. But if the bracha is shahakol, as many poskim think it is, so can you be yotze with the karpas on the marror? Or maybe if you're using lettuce for marror that was grown hydroponically, that has a different bracha of shahakol, maybe it would warrant its own birchas hanen and even before the motzi matzah. These are all questions in the marror which are interesting, and you can examine them and look into them another time. But I want to get to the deeper meaning and the deeper reasoning, some of the deeper view of marror and what it can tell us about what we're going through and what we're experiencing today. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichron Livracha, has a beautiful essay about the marror. And he suggests that the marror is so that we remember and we embrace and we hold on to and we never forget the taste of slavery. Don't take freedom and liberty for granted. Don't, even as we enjoy it and celebrate it and lean into it, don't ever think we've always had it, and don't necessarily believe we always will have it. Don't ever take it for granted. That the presence of Marror at the Pesach Seder, the presence of Marror in the freedom experience, is to embrace the freedom by remembering where we came from, how it all began. That it's not something that's a given and it should never ever be taken for granted, but something that should be deeply, deeply appreciated always. Sfas Emes also elaborates on a similar theme. The Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe, writes that we eat the marror in order to remember that not only were the matzah and the freedom from Hashem, but the suffering and the bitterness and the struggle and the pain, they're all part of a divine plan. They're all part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. It's very difficult to understand this, but it's the only way, in fact, to live. It can't be. We recently had on our Behind the Bima podcast, Zevi Samet, who's a tremendous Ben Torah and tremendous ball player, and I learned my lesson now, because twice we've had YU superstars, and we interviewed them right before they played the first game of the NCAA tournament, and then they lost. So we clearly are a bad. So we're going to wait for after the season before we interview the next superstar. You know, he's fantastic, and we had a whole conversation. He hit this, maybe you saw it, this turnaround fadeaway three-pointer almost at the buzzer to actually win. They'd been down 16 points with 15 minutes to go. If you're a basketball fan, you're excited about this, but it was pretty exciting to see this Ben Torah, this Bocca with a yarmulke, come back and win in that way. And we had a whole discussion. He talked about his emunah bitachon, his faith in Hashem throughout the game, even as halftime, even when they were down so much. He knew they were going to come back. He just didn't know exactly how. And he felt that emunah bitachon are what helped him win the game. And it was a beautiful perspective and a beautiful attitude, and I have no judgment about his approach, and I'm grateful for that conversation. But I'd wonder if we had it again after the next game when they lost. Is Hashem only involved when we win a game, or is Hashem also involved when we lose? Do we credit Hashem when it turns out well, or is Hashem also behind when it fails? More, perhaps, difficult. Is Hashem only behind when miraculously beepers kill our enemies, or ballistic missiles don't kill us, or buses explode and no one's on them? And those are miracles from Hashem? But October 7th, Hashem had nothing to do with. He was nowhere to be found. He deserves no responsibility or credit. Do we live a life with a recognition that everything and all is from Hashem, whether we understand it or not, whether it makes sense to us or not, whether we welcome it and embrace it or not, but somehow it all fits and it all comes and it all collects. He's carefully curated and choreographed it all from above. Says the Sfas Emes, we eat the marror at the Seder because even when we celebrate freedom, and especially when we celebrate our liberty, and the good times, and the positivity, and the revealed, and the open miracles, and the redemption, we don't bifurcate, and we don't differentiate, and we don't say, oh, Hashem is only the positive and the good, He has nothing to do with, and He's not behind the bad. That's a form of idolatry. Kadosh Baruch Hu, we know, is Yotzer Or V'Orei Choshech. We changed the word, not hara es hakol, because it wasn't palatable for us to say the actual pasuk, that He's Borei Ra. But it all comes from Him. And if we're going to take the good, we have to take the bad. If we're going to take the happy, we have to take the sad. If we take the pleasure, we have to take the pain. And the presence of the Marror, says the Sfas Emes at the Seder, is to remind us that it's all from Hashem. It's all part of a master plan. It's all part of His design. What we want, what we welcome, and what we wish never happened and never came. Others say we eat the marror to remember that even after matzah, even after being set free, even after redemption and miracles, there are bitter moments in life, and they too are part of the continued journey and the continued story. And this is a very, very important lesson. That freedom and miracles and gratitude to God doesn't come with the assumption or the expectation or the entitlement that it's smooth sailing from here. Oh, a miracle happened, so now we're good to go and nothing more bad will happen. Life is oscillating. There are ups and there are downs. It's a roller coaster and it's an adventure. And even after we have a breakthrough, even after we have freedom, even after there are miracles that we are so grateful for, we need to be prepared and we need to know we're going to encounter Marror again. When the Seder is over, when we go back to life, there will be more Marror waiting. So rather than pretend, rather than have some utopian dinner, rather than have some fantasy evening, we have Marror at the table in order to know and acknowledge and remember and remind ourselves that there will be Marror waiting. It reminds me of an insight of why we break a glass at a wedding. Baruch Hashem, I came in for a wedding I'll be going to tonight. And we end the chuppah with breaking the glass. And of course, the reason we're all most familiar with it, we feel so poignantly and so powerfully right now, is that there's no Beis HaMikdash. And as joyous as we are, as grateful as we are, as happy as we are, our joy is incomplete because there are, as we know and know too well, there is still Jewish suffering. But an alternative reason, another explanation that's given of why we break the glass at the chuppah, is to tell this couple, who right now just came off an Ufruf and a Shabbos Kala, where they are the greatest things on earth, and everyone offered the greatest praise, and everyone talked about how well and how much they belong together, to the chuppah where the rabbi described their virtues and their values and the families they come from, and how beautiful this Bayis Nem on their building will be. And before they walk away from that chuppah, we break something to tell them things are going to break. Things won't be perfect. It'll only be a matter of time until your first disagreement. You'll have to navigate your first argument. Someone's going to drop something and break something. Literally or metaphorically, things break. And so we break a glass under the chuppah to remind ourselves life is not smooth sailing and life is not perfect, but things break. Indeed, the Shvus Yankov quotes a minhag that existed several hundred years ago, no longer. We are of a minhag of bringing 3 matzahs to the Seder table. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, whatever it corresponds with. The children and grandchildren can save the Divrei Torah for the Seder night, whatever it corresponds with. But he quotes a custom that there was a 4th matzah. And the 4th matzah had a name. It was called the matzah's safek. And the 4th matzah was when one of the other 3 matzahs inevitably and invariably breaks, there's a 4th matzah ready. There's another ready, a backup matzah. As Jews, we live life knowing life is not perfect. It's not smooth sailing. We shouldn't expect, and we're not entitled, that everything will always go perfectly. We are prepared that there will be bumps, there will be hiccups, there will be problems, there will be challenges, there will be pain. We should not have any expectation. There are people who go through life, and the first sign, the first cracks, the first pain, the first ache, the first challenge, the first struggle or tension they run into, then everything falls apart because they had some unfair expectation. But that's not life, it never was, and that's not what we were promised. And so we have a 4th matzah at the table. Thank you, prepared. Thank you that something's going to break. And we break a glass under the chuppah to tell this couple, be ready, be prepared, know something is going to break. And says the Sfas Emes, we have Marror at the table, one of the reasons to know that there will continue to be Marror in life. Hopefully it'll be minor, little specks, barely discernible. For some it'll be great, large, bigger than a kazayas, unbearably painful. But there undoubtedly, inevitably, invariably, there continues to always be Marror. Thank you. Rav Kook has a magnificent explanation about the presence of Marror at the table. Rav Kook says, the reason that we eat Marror on Pesach, the reason Marror comes to the Seder table, is not a throwback to remember it was bitter and miserable and the suffering and the anguish and the torture and the torment and the persecution and the oppression. No. The reason that we have Marror is actually to enhance and to define and to experience the chayros, the freedom. How does tasting something bitter help me appreciate freedom? So Rav Kook has a magnificent insight. He says, a slave whose whole life is defined and characterized by bitterness, who never ever tastes, literally or metaphorically, something sweet, has no idea that something is bitter. The slave, everything is bitter. Every experience every taste, every moment, it is all consuming, it is all bitter. It's all bitter. The slave, the entire experience, the slave for whom time is not his own, who doesn't own any possessions, who can't eat, who doesn't acquire, who doesn't achieve, who has no independent identity. All of life is bitterness. The moment something comes across as bitter, then what it indicates, what it signals to you is that generally my default, I have freedom. My default is I taste sweetness. I have so much good. If you recoil and rescind because you taste something bitter, it means your taste buds are maladjusted to something bitter. And why are they maladjusted to something bitter? Because you've adjusted to sweetness. Generally, life is sweet and delicious and wonderful and good. And so when you taste something bitter, you say, ooh, wow, that's sharp. Wow, that's strong. Wow, that's bitter. Because generally that's not your experience. And so it stands out. Says Rav Kook, when something happens in life that feels bitter, you can either say, woe is me, and why is this bitter thing happening? And we're talking now about not necessarily the major, enormous, but the smaller. Like, woe is me, why is the Wi-Fi so slow? Woe is me, why did I get a middle, not an aisle seat? Woe is me, why am I stuck in this traffic? Woe is me, the little things that aggravate and agitate us in life but make many people crumble and fall apart. We can either feel victims to those bitter moments, or we can stop and pause and recognize, if this is the worst bitterness I have, if this tastes bitter, how much sweet is there in my life? If this is the bitterness, when you step on a Lego in the middle of the night, because a child or grandchild left it in the middle of the floor, you can scream in pain, and if you don't, there's something wrong with you, because there are a few things worse than stepping on a Lego barefoot in the middle of the night. You can scream in pain and wallow in why is me, or you can say, that hurt. But wow, I have a child or grandchild in this home who played with a Lego who left it in the middle of the floor. How sweet and delicious. How beautiful and how blessed am I to have that. Says Rav Kook, the presence of the Marror at the Seder is not to remember where we came from, or lean into the bitterness, or know that we're going to have more of it in the future, all the other explanations we saw. Says Rav Kook, the presence of the Marror, of the bitterness, is to remember the freedom. We eat the Marror not to invoke bitter times, but an affirmation of how sweet our lives generally are. We can transform ourselves from negative to more positive, not by overwhelming the negative with positive, by embracing the negative and being grateful if that's the negative in my life. I am maladjusted to negative. If I still taste bitter, then my life is generally free and filled with sweetness, We can be transformed with micro moments of ordinary positivity. We call them the micro moments of emunah and bitachon, the hugs and the winks and the nods from Hashem. The little things that maybe we overlook, we never notice, we never appreciate. But if our antenna is extended, we can see and we can feel and we can be grateful. The fact that I pulled up in front of Alex's house and there was a parking spot right there waiting, that was Hashem. It was a little hug and a little wink and a little nod. And we should hug and wink and nod back to him and appreciate it. And those micro moments of positivity in life, a cold cup of water someone gives you just when you need it. Shahakol niyeh, it's a micro moment of positivity. The things that we dismiss and overlook and we take for granted. Micro moments of ordinary positivity. But most negative people suffer from the opposite. The composite or the compounding of micro moments of ordinary negativity. The little small marrors of their life, they add up and begin to define their whole lives by marror. Instead of realizing that, if someone said something that stings, that was hurtful, or the store ran out of that Pesach product I was counting on, or the traffic made me late, or my seat assignment made me unhappy, or the restaurant service took too long, or the Wi-Fi is too slow. People are defined either by compounding those micro moments of negativity and becoming marror themselves, or realizing if those are my marror, how lucky and how blessed, how grateful and how sweet the rest of my life is. So says Rav Kook, we're commanded to eat the marror to remember that the romaine lettuce or the horseradish should be the only bitter and negative things at our table. If we can still taste bitter, that means by definition how sweet are our lives, that we should be so grateful for. Rabbi Dr. Lamb has another insight in his Haggadah. This is all by way of introduction. I want to get to the main point about Marror. So, I asked Alex how long I should go for. Should I say what you said? He said all day. But I'm not going to take him up on it. Rabbi Lamb says that we don't only eat the maror separately and independently, we don't eat the maror by itself, we also eat the maror in a sandwich, the original sandwich, the korach sandwich of Hillel, where Hillel made that shawarma. He took that lamb and he wrapped it in that lafa and added that charif, the maror, and made a delicious sandwich. Why would we put the maror and combine it with the matzah? Says Dr. Lamb, Hillel's sandwich teaches us about synthesis, the ability to live with attention, that life is not either or, and I think we can appreciate this last year and a half well. Life is not either matzah or maror. We don't live in chapters of life that are independent and separate and apart from each other. They're not units of time or periods, but often they overlap. Often they're integrated. Often there's a tension and a coexistence between the two. It's not that we had Marror, we were oppressed and persecuted, Hashem took us out, ooh, it's been smooth sailing since then. Not at all. Not nearly. Not this last year and a half. Not every single day that we still don't have our hostages home. We can have matzah and maror in a sandwich. What Hillel was indicating, what he was teaching us, is we can live with the tension between the two. They coexist, they're not separate and apart. And we've seen in this year and a half miracles. The revealed hand of Hashem. Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in his siddur, in his time, a couple hundred years ago already, Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in his siddur that the miracle of the Jewish people's survival and existence these 2,000 years, the miracle of his time, he writes, is greater than all the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim combined. Rav Yaakov Emden, in his siddur 200 years ago, and he didn't live through the beeper episode, and the ballistic missiles, and the buses that exploded without anyone getting hurt, and the many more miracles, many of which we may not even know about. And yet already then he wrote that the miracles of our time, the miracle of our existence, the miracle of our survival, are more revealed miracles. Those miracles are greater than the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea combined, put together. We didn't walk out of Egypt to smooth sailing, to being a life of freedom, to building a Beis HaMikdash and then celebrating being on top. Our entire existence has been ups and downs. Our entire existence has been exile and little steps towards the redemption. And this year and a half, we've had moments of horrific loss and suffering and unimaginable pain, and we've had moments of revealed miracles and the undeniable hand of Hashem. How could they be happening together? Sometimes on the very same day. That's Hillel's sandwich. The matzah and the maror, the tension between the two, eating them together. Eating them together. Understanding that we live with that tension and that we're comfortable and it's a space that we're able to live in. I'll take you back to Purim for one moment. Many say, we all know the gematria of Amalek is Safek, and that the mitzvah of Mechias Amalek are commandment to destroy and obliterate and eliminate Amalek wherever they need to be eliminated, and Amalek are rearing their ugly head across many venues and in many different capacities today, and they all need to be taken. And whether it's, of course, our enemies, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, who need to literally be obliterated and eliminated and wiped off the face of the earth, as the Torah instructs us, whether it's students on visas in America who are advocating evil, who need to have their visas rescinded and be sent out of America, whether it's members of Congress who don't understand and who are adjacent and who are standing with Amalek and they need to be defeated in their next election, whether it's heads of universities who don't protect Jewish students and are allowing Amalek to rule, who need to be fired and find a new job. We have a mitzvah of Mechias Amalek. So the gematria of Amalek is Safek, doubt, because Amalek asher korcha baderech, Rashi says, Lashon Mikra, happenstance, chance, random. Oh, the parking spot, it just happened. Look at that. Alex, what a coincidence. There was a parking spot open in front of your house just when I needed it. Wow, what a coincidence. That's the voice of Amalek, even inside us. And that's the classic lesson, the classic teaching about destroying Amalek is getting rid of Safek. Rabbi Weinfeld, the Rav here in Ramat Eshkol in Yerushalayim, he says that misses the point. And when you hear this, you'll never approach this question or that gematria the same way again. How could you say there should be no suffix, no doubt? It's human nature and human condition to have doubt. When will we get the hostages home? How will this war end? What's going to be? Even with all the living with emunah, swag, and paraphernalia in the world, it's impossible to not be filled with doubt. You wonder, and you have uncertainty, and our life is not predictable. There is doubt. And it's interesting that of all holidays that are filled with suffix, even the reading of Parsha Zachor, Zecher or Zecher. In your shul you read it twice? The Minhag Yisrael? Yeah, exactly. You read it several times, in several different ways. When I was in Canberra, I think 7 or 8 different people came up to read Zecher. So the very Parsha of Amalek, we have a suffix. What's the proper way to read it? We have cities. That's a suffix. Ayaros Misupakos. Were they walled, unwalled? When should they observe Purim? We have 5 psukim in the Megillah that we repeat because we're unsure exactly how to read it with this letter, without this letter. So we reread 5 psukim in the Megillah. If there's any holiday in our calendar which incorporates and includes in it so much suffix, so much doubt in terms of the actual observance, how to read these 5 psukim, when certain places should observe Purim, how to read the only biblical obligated part of Torah reading, Zecher, Amalek. It's all suffix. So what is it? So says Rabbi Weinfeld, a person is not supposed to get rid of suffix. That's impossible. That's asking us not to be the humans that we are. What's the mitzvah of fighting Amalek? Is learning to live with the suffix. The capacity to embrace the tension, to live with suffix, to not need all the answers, to not need certainty, to not need to be able to anticipate and predict everything that's going to happen, to be able to accept and say, yeah, there's suffix. I don't know how this will turn out. I don't know what's going to be. I don't know when this, my individual or our collective particular thing will end. There's doubt. There's uncertainty, and I can live with it. I can live with it. I can be comfortable within it. The capacity to live with doubt. In fact, the Torah, the Gemara Chazal tell us, Haman min Torah minayin. Where do you see a remez, a hint, an allusion to Haman in the Torah? Hamin ha'etz. The eitz hadas. Tov vara. Why? Because the chait of Adam Arishon was needing to know Yodea das Elokim. He couldn't live with uncertainty. He wanted a crystal ball. He wanted to be able to predict and anticipate and secure knowledge and to know with certainty everything. That was the very original chait of Adam Arishon. Yodea das Elokim. I need to know. I can't live with this doubt. I can't live with this uncertainty. When we said Nasa v'nishma, we did the opposite. We said Nasa, we're in. We can live. And Nishma, well, come to find out, we can live, we can embrace uncertainty in our lives. And so the korech sandwich, the sandwich of Hillel, was matzah and marror at the same time. To be able to live with the tension of the two, to not have an expectation that it's either or, it's one or the other, but to know that we can have both. We can have both at the same time. There's a lot more I wanted to share, but I want to get to the crux, which will be, I guess, the essence of what I wanted to really share. We're living in a time, in a day and age, where people don't have the capacity to endure pain. The statistics, the data all bear out. The opioid addiction crisis that's taking place across the world, the addiction to substances, which anybody who works in the recovery area will tell you, at the root of every addiction, it doesn't matter the substance or the behavior, is not the substance or the behavior. It's a hole in one's heart. It's a pain in one's soul that someone is trying to desperately escape, to numb themselves to. And they're looking for an agent. They're looking for something to be able to numb themselves. When a person is in unbearable pain, in a depressive state, they sleep. Because they will describe to you, it is painful and unbearable just to be awake. Just to be conscious, just to be alive and confront my reality, the ache, the pain. I need to be asleep. People who struggle with depression and depressive state, sleep. And those who need to be awake or are awake to operate through life often turn to addiction, because whatever they're addicted to, whatever whatever behavior or whatever substance is numbing. It's trying to escape. Because pain is unbearable. We're living in a time more than any that the world is telling us we shouldn't have to live with pain. And that pain is categorically bad. And that we're entitled to feel an expectation that we'll be able to create lives without pain. But that's not true. And it's not accurate. And it's my chiddush in Marror that maybe the presence of the Marror at the Seder is to remind us that freedom is the ability to bear pain. A person who is enslaved to comfort, a person who's enslaved to convenience, a person who's enslaved to always having to be happy and positive and feel good is a person who is a slave. They're being oppressed by the tyranny of comfort and the tyranny of convenience. But a person who can lean in and say, yeah, this is uncomfortable. And yes, this is painful. Yes, this is inconvenient. Yes, I don't want this or like this, but I can live with this. Only that person is really and truly free. Maybe that's why the Gemara Pesachim Kuf Tez Vav tells us that though matzah you're allowed to swallow in one bite, bala maror lo yatsa. If you swallowed the kazayas of maror in one bite, you did not fulfill the mitzvah. The mitzvah is dafka, the mitzvah specifically is to chew the maror. Hashem says, here's some maror, chew on it. Chew on it. Don't swallow the maror in one bite and then quickly wash it down with a sweet drink, because that's how you're going to avoid the discomfort and the inconvenience, because you're going to numb yourself and you're going to escape and you can't live with it. No. Here's some maror, chew on it. Chew on it. Taste it. Feel it. Lean into it. Embrace it. Recognize it too as part of life, and understand that only when you're able to live with discomfort and inconvenience, only when you can live with pain and you don't need, and you're not running, and you don't feel pushed to escape and to numb, only then are you free. Only then are you free. The Ishbitzer Rebbe has a beautiful insight. Ishbitzer writes in Esod Yesharim, that the beginning of the Yeshua, the salvation, was when the Jewish people began to feel and could live with the bitterness. He writes in Beis Yankov, Romiz Mar Sheher Lam Hashem Yisbarach Achar Igulus Lam Eya Gish Marirus Galusam Vazeh Kasav Arizal Shetzarach Lamatz B'Shnaim Shegish Marirus Vazeh Hamtakaso. You have to chew it. When you chew that which is bitter and you bring out its sweetness, when you chew and you lean into the pain and you find meaning and purpose even in it, you find that which is sweet about it. Rav Kluger, Rav Avnsi Kluger in Beit Shemesh, a great tzaddik in his Sefer Haggadah, B'nai Bechura Yisrael, he writes that Marror is Iker Mochen de Gadlus. We live in this world with Mochen de Gadlus. We can have a very small and diminished and very narrow and very unsophisticated, immature, undeveloped perspective of life. And then sometimes we break through and we have what are called mochen de gadlus. And the mochen de gadlus is that capacity to look at the world and look at ourselves and look at our lives with a broadness and a perspective, with a sophistication and with a maturity, with a greatness. Mochen de gadlus. And very counterintuitively he writes how Marror is the agent, the source of this mochen de gadlus, of this capacity to have a perspective of greatness. Viktor Frankl, in A Search for Meaning, writes, he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. If you have a why, you can bear almost any how. When life throws at you something painful and uncomfortable and bitter, if you have a why and you can make meaning of it, then you can live for almost any how. How? How can we overcome on October 7th? How do we bounce back from this year and a half? How do we endure? And how do we continue while hostages are not yet home? How can we navigate whatever bitterness or struggle or challenge is in our own personal lives? The answer is not to escape it or run away from it. It will follow. It doesn't disappear. It won't go away. And it's not the answer to run or to numb or to sleep or to escape. That is to be a slave to live a pain-free life. That is to be enslaved to comfort and convenience, to the tyranny and to the oppression. To truly set ourselves free is the capacity to experience and chew on the pain and find the meaning and the purpose and the order. Because we are a people who know our why. We know why we are here and what we live for. We know the difference we're meant to make in this world. We're here to be marbek v'od shamayim, to repair the world in Hashem's image. We're here to redeem a world from so much darkness and to be a source of its light. We're here to be role models on a mission. We know why. We know our why, so we can endure almost anyhow. When we know what we're living for, we can chew on that marror. We can chew on that marror. There's a phenomenon today of toxic positivity. And with all the motivational speakers, and they're wonderful and I enjoy them, inspired by them too, there's some messaging about always be happy and always be smiling, always be positive, and everything's always amazing. But that's not authentic and it's not real. And the people acting that way are often actors, and they're trying to imitate something and live a standard that not only is not realistic, but it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy and it's dangerous. We actually have a tradition of feeling pain. We don't pretend we don't. We don't escape it or run away from it. We don't suffer from toxic positivity, that everything's always amazing and perfect and fantastic and phenomenal. The Gemara Brachos Daf Samach Keshem Shemavorchen Ala Tov Mavorchen Ala Ra. We make a Berachas HaTov HaMeitiv, but we make a Bracha of Dayana Emes, a Keshem. We don't make HaTov HaMeitiv on everything. One doesn't hear that a loved one passed away and say, "Oh, HaTov HaMeitiv, Hashem is amazing. I'm just so glad I had them for the years that they were here." That's not realistic, and it's not healthy, and it's not who we are. We have a Keshem. We have a tradition, a rich and a long tradition of how to live and embrace pain. How to embrace pain. We have a pasuk lo siskodedu. We're not allowed to harm ourselves in grieving or mourning a loss of a loved one, because because we are children of Hashem. And the first writes, we tear a garment, not our body. We tear what's temporary, not what's permanent. We believe in immortality, so we know we will be reunited with whom we lost. It's only temporary, and so we don't react excessively and in the extreme. But we do feel pain. We embrace the pain. Shulchan Aruch writes in Yeridea that in fact, a mourner, somebody who's sitting Shiva, someone who suffered loss, who doesn't mourn and grieve, is cruel. It's borrowing from the language of the Rambam. He says it's cruel to not be sad. Because one is not sad after loss. What they are implying is that the loved one, the one who's no longer here, meant nothing. They made no difference. They're here, they're gone, I'm good. But when a person feels grief, doesn't mean they have to wallow in pain. It doesn't mean it has to be excessive or extreme. It doesn't mean you have to be paralyzed or debilitated. But when a person at least recognizes and feels grief, what they're saying is, this was someone who mattered. This was someone who meant something. And this loss, it hurts. And I chew on that pain. I chew on that pain because it gives meaning to the person who was here. It gives meaning to the life that they led. So I chew on that pain because it meant something. It meant something. Adam Grant, who's a great sociologist, economist, he's a great author. He had a tweet once. He wrote, "Many people see grief as pain. They avoid it, suppress it, or race to process it so they can expel it from their lives. Here's a beautiful alternative. Grief is unexpressed love. Holding on to it is a way of staying close to the people we've lost." Let me read that again. Here's a beautiful alternative. Don't avoid it, suppress it, or race to process it, or expel it. Grief is unexpressed love. Holding on to it is a way of staying close to the people that we've lost. To the people that we've lost. Hashem runs the world. He's in charge, He's in control, everything is for a reason, nothing is random. And that gives us comfort. But having the comfort and the knowledge that He's in charge and in control, that there's an immortality and eternity in a world we're not yet in, doesn't create an expectation that we won't have pain while we're here. The Medrash tells us that Avram Avinu cried and rejoiced on his way to the Akedah. And the Lekach Tov quotes in his Pirkei Emunah, the Nechama, quotes this Medrash, and it's so powerful and so important because we all were taught, and we all have the image of Avram skipping and singing and dancing, taking his grown son to slaughter him, to say goodbye to him, to kill him, to go against everything he had taught and preached to the world. And we're all given this image that Avram, who discovered and proliferated ethical monotheism, so Avram certainly had a skip and a step, had a joy in his heart, had a dance on his way to the Akedah, right? Wrong. Says the Medrash, Avram Avinu oscillated between singing and dancing and then stopping and crying. And then he'd sing and dance and then he'd stop and he'd cry. Because he was human, he was real. He was Av Hamon Goyim. He is the father of our people. And he modeled for us what it means to be human and to be real, is to fulfill the will of Hashem, to march and walk to the Akedah that's asked of us, but to also not do it and pretend like it's all happy and joyful and wonderful, to try to suppress or escape or numb. That's unrealistic and it's unhealthy and it will backfire and it will destroy us and it will express itself in very unhealthy ways. But like Avram Avinu, to cry and rejoice, to live with the matzah and the marror at the same time, to not try to pretend there is no suffix, but to learn to embrace and live with the suffix. There was a non-Jewish sage who said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain in life is inevitable. Pain in life is inevitable. To be alive is to know and to expect. Things are going to break down. They're going to start to hurt. They're going to need to be replaced. They don't come with a lifetime warranty. And if they do, that lifetime is not long enough. Your knees, your hips, your ankles, the things that need to be replaced. People encounter those in life, they react in one of two ways. Some understand that that was part of life, how lucky I am to be alive, that my parts now have outlived their warranty and they need to be replaced. And others say, there's no God and woe is me, and how can it be that I need to have knee replacement surgery? To be alive is to know and to expect. There'll be pain. There'll be pain from the loss of your knees, and God forbid pain from the loss of people in your life. And whether it's illness or injury, or whether it's growing old, or whether it's challenges that are unexpected that life throws our way, pain is inevitable. But suffering is a choice. Pain times resistance is suffering. Pain and presence is freedom. Tara Brach is a psychologist who's blended psychological principles with meditation practices. She has a book about this. And in her book, that's her formula. That pain and resistance is suffering. When you try to resist and you try to pretend, and there's a tension, you're fighting and you're trying to eliminate and purge that pain, that's suffering. But pain and presence, when you lean in, or in the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch words, Bala Matzah, when you chew on the pain, then that's freedom. That capacity to live with it, to make sense of it, to give meaning to it, to be able to embrace it, to persevere and endure despite it. That is true freedom. That is true freedom. And that's what I think Pesach is all about. That's what I think this time we're finding ourselves, this message is maybe more poignant than other times. Chewing the marror sweetens, not because it reduces the bitterness, but it gives it a presence. And pain times presence is freedom, and freedom is what we're trying to get. So when we live our life and we recognize that Hashem is in charge, He's in control, we're not random and chance, I don't have to worry, I don't have to be afraid. I am uncertain, and I do have doubt, and we don't know what will be, but whatever will be for a reason. Whatever pain we'll encounter, whatever pain will be our purpose, whatever pain will be part of our plan and our lives, it's inevitable, it's invariable, it's inescapable. Stop running away from it. It's at the Seder, it's in the sandwich, and when we eat it, in order to be Yotze, you have to chew on it. Because real freedom is the capacity to live with pain. And if there's any country, any people, it's all of you who I'm in awe of, and so deeply and boundlessly appreciative too. But really it's all of the Jewish people around the world who for a year and a half have been living with unbearable pain. Every day. Right now, a ceasefire that seems to only benefit one side. In a ceasefire, each side is supposed to benefit, but only one side right now is benefiting. No more hostages are coming home, and only another side is able to regroup. And that is unbearably painful. Every minute, every hour, each day that continues is compounding that pain. There is so much pain of this last year and a half. So much freedom, so much redemption, so many miracles, but laced with and integrated with and wrapped in a sandwich with also so much pain. Real freedom is to learn to live, the capacity to have the tension between the two, to not have an expectation they'll be separate and apart. Real freedom is not a need to escape or numb or have a false expectation but to be able to chew on that pain with a sense of purpose. A people in Pesach is the ultimate reminder of our why. And when we remind ourselves of our why we are here, a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we are here, that He has assigned us, He has sent us all as agents and ambassadors to redeem and repair His world, that we can endure almost anyhow of our lives. To recognize and to respect that pain is part of the process of pleasure and of freedom. And the Mirz Hashem Halavai, that the Marror only be a speck, that the Marror be something insignificant, that the Marror be something that we were Yotze and that we're done and that's behind us. And the Mirz Hashem Halavai, in the future going forward, may we celebrate only the matzah of freedom, of liberty, and of the complete and speedy redemption. Thank you so much.